Hi, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. We're back again with our DevSecOn chapter meetups, and you will see a lot of meetups happening now as we have started the year. This meetup is actually a virtual one, but we will have a lot of in person meetups in different parts of the country. So today we have two speakers, Karan Shah and Somain Mukherjee, talking about different topics. So today we would get started with Karan Shah, who's going to be talking about an interesting aspect around shift left. So without further ado, let me just get him in the session and we can get started. Hi, Karan.
Hello, Andan ma'am. How are you?
I am good. So, Karan, people are really excited about your session and Somain session. Why don't we get started with your session and then we will pull in Somain as well and we can kickstart the session.
Sure. First of all, thank you for this opportunity, and I'm excited to present this on this medium.
Thank you so much for joining us today. The stage is all yours.
Okay, welcome everyone. This talk is with respect to fixing and building along with shifting left, and we'll see how we can embed security in the early stages of the SDLC. A little introduction about myself. I am Karan Shah. I work as a principal security consultant at Not So Secure, which is now a part of Clarinet Cybersecurity. I have over 11 years of experience in information security, and I specialize in application security, source code reviews, mobile application security, DevSecOps, and a lot more with respect to AppSec. I have been a trainer at Black Hat and Nullcon, and here is my LinkedIn ID. So if in case anyone wants to reach out on LinkedIn, brainstorm ideas with me, I'll be happy to connect. I also have a year's experience being a developer in the past, and I've built some amount of websites which might be active today as well. I haven't checked, but yeah. And yep, those websites ended up being vulnerable, and that is where my road towards security started. Now, a little recap about what we will be covering today. We'll be coming across some traditional security related concerns, and we'll see how security comes too late, like when you're developing and deploying a website. Now, we'll also talk about how these security issues, if identified later on in the development or the deployment stage, how it can become a disaster. We'll talk about fixing vulnerabilities, and we'll see how it becomes costly when we do not fix them early. And I mean, if it is getting fixed later in the development stage, and a lot more with respect to implementing security, training developers, and other context in within the slide deck today. So my screen is right here, and I'll be looking at the camera and talking. So it's going to be a lot of left and right that I'll be looking at, right? So innovation pressure and drain. For developers, making new websites and products is a pressure. There is a huge competition between development activities and developers where they want to speed up the development process, right? And for them to get a release earlier is something that is a tough decision for them to make. It kind of puts them in a spot, right? Like if in case they are going to make their release earlier, and if there is untested code present, then that is going to release a potentially vulnerable code. The increasing demand for a shorter software development lifecycle is something that is a very tough spot for developers in the today's state. And they ideally want to be in a continuous loop of efficiently building and fixing, but having vulnerabilities identified in security practices, that too at a later stage of their STLC, is something that is going to increase the vulnerability backlog. And then fixing them in this fast-paced development is going to be quite a challenge, right? This ends up frustrating developers. This ends up making them very much, you could say, wavered away from security. They will see security as something that is a huge barrier, and that fixing these vulnerabilities at the later stage of the STLC starts becoming a problem. The cost of late fixes. it was identified in a study that 70% of vulnerabilities are introduced in within the development phase, and 80% of these vulnerabilities don't get fixed in within this development phase. Now, I'll give you an example of a very famous e-commerce website. I cannot take the name of it, and they eventually ran out of business because they had a SQL injection bug present in their code, and they did not test it prior and went live with that specific vulnerability. Now, what attackers did, and if you all know what SQL injection is like one of the most dangerous attacks that could happen to a web application. And what attackers did is that they exploited this bug, ended up deleting everything that was present in the database, and completely, like, we could say, taking the website down. My bad. And completely taking the website down. I mean, they did a lot with respect to respect to the content in the database, and were eventually able to also take a DOS attack and put the database to sleep and affect the website on a very heavy way. Now, this isn't this isn't just a coding loss, or this isn't just some we could say technical loss that has happened to the application. This is a financial loss. This is a reputational loss as well, because at one specific moment there could be a lot of users accessing this web application, and having a SQL injection bug taking a web application down is something that is not going to look good on the application's reputation side of things. This also ended up becoming a legal problem, because imagine having an e-commerce website and getting your orders table deleted from your database is something that is going to not let they not make your users happy, right? I mean, those users will not be able to find their orders, and that ended up becoming a legal battle. They eventually had to shut their doors, and they ran out of business. Hence, the cost of fixing a bug in your staging environment or in your QA environment is going to be way lesser compared to fixing the bug in your production environment. If we talk about cost of fixing in a staging environment, there isn't any huge cost that is to be looked upon to, right? Now, security as a bottleneck in DevOps. For developers, security is something that they do not like. I mean, that is something that is always a roadblock for them. Like having a development team working on a product for like 6 months, and then when the release day comes, that when this approach towards security is something that is done at the end of the deployment and the development process, and that is where some security vulnerability gets identified. Now, this is going to push your release date. This is going to introduce a lot of coding changes inside your code, and this will be looked upon as a roadblock. But security isn't a roadblock, right? It's not even a destination. It is just a part of your development journey. It has to be there from the very start. It is a process of continuously learning, adapting, and improving your secure coding skills. Now, what are the different issues towards security that were identified by developers? Now, traditional way of implementing security was something that slowed the developers down, right? And security is, I mean, for developers, security is not a part of their job. That is what they think. And it's something that is not looked upon as a part of the STLC in a lot of organizations even today. So having strategies on detecting, I mean, having security strategies for detecting, fixing issues after deployment increased the risk of vulnerabilities in production. And yep, that pressure of having vulnerabilities and going live with a vulnerable code was a different type of a bottleneck. I mean, having this time-consuming process of security and having it coming up at the end every time ended up becoming a bottleneck for developers. So what challenges? I mean, we spoke about certain problems. And what are different type of challenges that you would look upon in while implementing DevSecOps and application security? The trust between development and security is something that is quite the concern here. This is a relatively newer report from Checkmarx. It is a Checkmarx market survey that was taken that happened in December last year. And as you can see, there have been quite a huge amount of percentage. This is quite a huge amount of percentage chart that what issues that developers faced while performing secure coding. For 38% of respondents, they say that the top problem is the internal balancing act between speed and security, because speed and security is not something they could take hand in hand, right? 29% of developers were not able to prioritize what to fix first. Let me just get a marker up over here. There you go. So 29% of developers were not able to prioritize what to fix first. I mean, there were multiple security vulnerabilities. Identifying and prioritizing critical vulnerability is something developers will not understand, right? 19% were not able to identify or choose the right security tool for implementing that security practice, right? 14%, 14%, there was, I mean, that is the biggest elephant in the room. There was no collaboration between the development team and the security team. Now, for developers, security is a very rare concept. It's a very different concept. They've not been fine-tuned towards security by the default, by their default coding practices. And hence collaboration is something that was an issue. Now, I've just picked my top 3 to 4 areas, which were like a common problem for developers while implementing security. There are multiple other problems, such as lack of security knowledge and training, having too many vulnerabilities to look at, right? If you all have heard about the Fannie Mae strategy, they were the DevOps teams having with who were, I mean, I guess Citra Elango and John Willis was a part of that team, and for them, when they provided reports to developers, they were, I mean, the developers weren't really happy to look at reports. They never even opened the report file. It looked like a very boring document for them. They worked with Jira tickets, and that is how vulnerabilities were started. Started to get reported in that organization, right? So these are certain challenges for developers, and in the recent trends, developers are going to be those people who are going to drive your application security, because for them, knowing where the vulnerability is and fixing it is a very key concept. So it is your application security people who will identify bugs, but developers are also going to be a very key player if you are planning your application security program. So let's talk about SAST. I'm sure a lot of us know about what static analysis secure testing SAST is. It also goes by the name secure coding analysis, right? Are we doing SAST correctly? Is the question. The point is that when do you get your SAST into the picture? Is it too late for getting SAST? Now, for example, if the application has already gone live and if you're performing SAST later on, the vulnerability is already there for attackers to play with, correct? So, are we doing SAST in the right way is the very important question. My suggestion is to have SAST from the very first implementation of your code. When you start writing your code, have your SAST run through it, and that is how it should be. And that is what your continuous integration and continuous delivery towards DevSecOps would talk about. Does one SAST tool fit correctly in the pipeline? That is also a question, right? Um, you want to ensure that your SaaS tool has the capability of scanning that specific programming language. Hence, it is also important to see if your programming language do really matter, right? So, if in case my web application has been written in Python, and if I'm using some random security audit tool, some PHP CS security audit tool for performing a SAST on a code that is written in Python, it's not going to be compliant, right? It's not going to work with that tool. That tool is going to be something that is not going to fall in place. So choosing the right set of tool for your programming language is important when you want to perform a SAST or when you plan your SAST program, right? Understanding everything with respect to your with respect to your coding stack, with respect to coding technologies. There isn't one programming language that is going to be present within an organization, right? There could be multiple languages, and having tools compatible with those languages is important. So plan your SAST correctly, and do not just rely on one tool. Even if you have, let's assume you have checkmarks, which is going to have support for a lot of tools. But if you have Python, I would recommend have another tool also enabled. Have Bandit or a SendGrep also run scans so that gray areas are not missed out. Now, let me talk about one gray area that I have observed while you talk about SAST. If you talk about a .NET application, and if you want to run a .NET scan using checkmarks, Checkmarx is going to perform a scan on the extensions of a .NET application. It's going to consider I could say .aspx and .aspx.cs as my extension files, and it's going to run a scan in the code that is present on those files. What about your web.config file? Now, if any .NET developers are present here, your web.config file is a file which would have the connection string, and having that in within your code is not the right secure coding as per .NET. And if you see the secure coding guidelines of .NET, there you could go ahead and encrypt your connection string where the details with respect to your database and multiple other configurations could not be visible in clear text, right? So hence, never rely on one tool. Run multiple tools because there could be certain gray areas that your tool can miss out on. What about manual SAST? If I had to plan any kind of a SaaS program, I would not only rely on automated tools. There is a lot of manual SAST that needs to be done, and it could be also manual SAST could also come into picture when false positives have to be checked upon, because SaaS tools are automated eventually and they will introduce a lot of false positives. So checking those is also quite the key over here. So mix a tool with, since this is DevSecOps, we will be talking a lot with respect to automation. Having SAST in your tool is quite beneficial. If I give you the example of the organization who ran out of business, what if they ran a SAST previously? What if they ran a SAST before deploying the code online, before going live? This vulnerability would have been identified way prior. They would have fixed the vulnerability, they would have shifted left again with the fix, and they would be still running the businesses. Now, what about software components? Again, you might be a developer who has been doing the right secure coding practices, right? You must have followed the ASVS guide, you must have followed the OS top 10 secure coding guide, and everything with respect to secure coding, be it input validation, be it parameterized queries, be it HTML encoding. You must have done everything right. Do you think your application code, your application is still secure, is going to be 100% secure? I would say no. What about software components? How about zero-day attacks getting identified on your software components? That is where checking software components is also important. When you talk about fixing and building your source code. Today, we do not come across a lot of developers who write their source code from scratch, right? Nobody does that. Everyone is going to rely on pre-built modules, and they're going to simply customize that module as per that specific need and have that code readied up, right? It's a smart thing to do. It's something that is going to speed up your development process. But what if your pre-built code had some problem that is going to go ahead and affect your programming, your complete web application, introducing a critical bug? We can talk about a lot instances like these. We come across developers who would go to GitHub and get ready code from there, who could go to Stack Exchange and get ready code from there. They'll simply embed that code into their piece of programming stack and just modify it as per their needs and use it. But what if a class library in that code is vulnerable? Then that is going to affect your web application as well, right? How many of us know about CMS, content management systems, WordPress, Joomla, right? If you see WordPress's history, there have been a huge number of vulnerabilities present in WordPress. And if you've built your WordPress web application with that version, you could use WP scan and identify and check if there are vulnerabilities present. But if there are, that is going to make your application vulnerable, despite of you following the right secure coding practice. Hence, secure coding is just not enough. Performing a software composition analysis scan, checking your dependencies, is also equally important. What about SBOMs? Your software bill of material helps you manage your total, you could say, supply chain software stack in the right way, right? You could come across a lot of dependencies within your code, and attackers are going to exploit these third-party libraries, these dependencies, these commonly known vulnerabilities or technology-specific challenges, and hence managing an SBOM and keeping an eye on your SBOM is important. So, how do you implement SBOM in shift left? Early identification. Generate an SBOM during your development. Keep a track of all those, all your class libraries and all your dependencies that are present in the source code. And there are multiple different type of tools that you could use. Perform an automated scan. integrate SBOM checks into CI/CD pipelines to catch if there are vulnerabilities with respect to any dependencies, and continuous monitoring. Have used use SBOM to track changes in your in your class libraries, or if there are any security patches that needs to be implemented, and this will help you track vulnerabilities way earlier, and in within specifically vulnerabilities with respect to your dependencies way earlier in your development process itself. Now the dash dilemma. We did talk about SC and we did talk about SAST, right? What about DAST? Now, if you plan your dash program, there are two things that comes into picture. One is your automated dash, and second is your manual dash, right? But is your manual dash enough? And if not, if you want to automate, can you rely completely on automated or manual processes only? What about different attacks that only your manual dynamic analysis can cover up? What about business logic attacks? What about privilege escalation attacks? Now, these attacks, role-based privilege escalation is what I meant. These attacks is something that only your manual DAST can cover. But if you talk about automation, you would still want to perform DAST to check for vulnerabilities present within the request. You want to check for server-side configuration-related vulnerabilities and a lot more. So having DAST implemented is quite important in the pipeline, but performing DAST, automated DAST every time in the pipeline is something which I would term as an operational suicide. Because if you're not performing any code changes with respect to or you could say if you're not performing any you just performing some cascading style shit, if you've just upgraded some Docker file in within your application code, you're not actually changing your code logic, so you don't want to perform dash that time. If you've introduced some new modules in your code, that is when you want to introduce dash. And testing only those modules is something that would be a recommended way to go about. Like if you've just added 5 new pages to your application stack, and if you've run your dash pipeline, that dash tool is going to run an application security scan throughout your application, throughout all the functionalities of your application, which is not necessary, right? So having run dashed on the specific new functionalities that have been introduced is something that needs to be managed out. And yes, what tools do we use for dashed is also important. There are multiple tools. Burp Suite is one of the most famous tools that you could come across. But if you have any licensing limitations and if you want to stick to open source, you could also use the Zap proxy by OWASP. Another amazing tool. You could make use of command line interface, and that could help you perform your dashed. So fixing things with shift left, security as a code by default is important, right? Having that mindset of security as a code is necessary. So automate security in pipelines and implement them in the secure coding practices. Automate security testing needs to be introduced. Integrate SAST, DAST, SCA into the CI/CD pipeline. There's a lot more that you could introduce. It's not just necessary to stick to these 3 practices. There's a lot more that needs to be introduced. But we'll stick to fixing and building and the application security side of things first. Developer security trainings, hands-on secure coding workshop is important for developers to have their mindset shifted towards secure coding, and also having a threat model. Now, threat model is something that has been spoken a lot about when you speak about DevSecOps. You can't automate threat modeling in your pipeline. I mean, that's not what I want to talk about, but having a plan towards threat modeling is something that we will talk about later on in the slide deck. Threat modeling. I would say securing by default is the mindset that we want to have. Now, why do you want to have threat model introduced over here? So if you talk about shifting left, it's not about just implementing some random security tools and identifying bugs early, right? You want to have it implemented from the very start. And when you plan your AppSec, or you could say security program, that is where threat model comes into picture. Because every organization is different. Every organization has a different way of doing things. Their security posture would be completely different, right? So identifying a trust boundary and data flow between the system is important. See how your user input is being handled and what type of data gets passed through to user input. Check for validations if present in within that, if possible or not. Find potential threats. Understand the current security posture of the organization. Check out the current gaps in within the secure coding practices. check the latest trending vulnerabilities, and understand their overall security posture towards you could say secure coding and overall bugs that are present within the application. A vulnerability management tool is something that can definitely help in managing your current trend of vulnerabilities. Define mitigation strategies, talk about secure controls to overall improve the security posture. It could be identifying the common bugs. Let's assume the SQL injection is a very common bug that has been identified. That gives us an indication that parameterized queries is something developers don't follow. So have trainings curated accordingly, and and then improve the security, gives a secure coding style of the developers in that sense. And then continuous update. Threat modeling is something that is going to mature in the application, in within your complete DevSecOps process. It's not just something that is going to come right into place. It's going to keep on looking on different type of attacks. Despite of performing secure coding, there will be still some vulnerability that gets identified, and it's going to keep on understanding where these vulnerabilities and how these vulnerabilities have been identified, and what our plan could be to improve the security posture even further. Multiple tools, Microsoft Threat Modeling Tool or OS Threat Dragon, can be used in such kind of instances. Now, culture change. This is a very big challenge. If you talk about, we spoke about different challenges, but then if you want to improve your security posture, culture change is also a challenge, right? Um, Developers and application security, or good say security teams, they need to work together as one team, as two sides of the same coin. Security isn't a different team. It's just one team, everything under the hood, where developers and security are going to sit together, bridge the gap between them, and work in this work in a secure, you could say, security by default fashion. Accept security by default approach. Don't block it, because security isn't a barrier. It's an enabler. It is going to eventually let your applications be secure. If that bigger picture is going to be accepted by the developers, implementing security is going to be easy. Having secure coding from the very first phase of SDLC is the way to go. That will be helped with the help of security trainings. You could have 2-day security trainings for developers where they could work on the OS top 10 side of things and different vulnerabilities and how to fix them. And then having that implemented in within the application is the way to go. Now, again, if we talk about fixing vulnerabilities, it's a nightmare for developers. I understand that. It's not something very easy and like, okay, I can just say that, okay, this vulnerability is going to be fixed, but it's not that easy for me. It's easy for me to say, but it's not that easy for them to do it. The new code might not be compatible with the data. It might not compatible with the other functionalities present inside the application. So that becomes quite a challenge. And for them to change, if anyone has to go through some change, there is always going to be a grin. There's always going to be a, you could say, approach where you want to avoid something like that from happening. And that is where the culture change would come into picture. So how do you then bridge the gap between development team and the security team? You want to introduce someone called as a security champion. Now, security champion are those cross-skilled individuals who would have development security or operation and security knowledge, but security is a primary knowledge that they need to have. So it could be someone who is a developer who knows how to also who's also good with security, or someone from the operation teams and also good with security is someone who can become a security champion. Now, this person might look as someone who is going to be a bridge between both development and security, but it is not something that should be sticking to just one person. Security champions could be anybody from the team, and this opportunity is to be given to multiple people in the team. And it is something that needs to become attractive for people to look onto, to adopt onto. It could be incentives, or it could be internal hackathons or internal sponsorships that would end up encouraging people to become security champions, right? So here, identify developers who are also passionate towards security. Security champions is someone who is going to introduce trainings for developers, who's going to understand what type of a person needs what type of a security training. It could be the higher management which just needs um, normal introduction to security as a training. It could be the developers who need a thorough secure coding training. and that is what your security champion does. Your security champion is going to be more of a mediator for all the tricky situations your developer and your security team is been put into. So building the gap between development and security, how do you ensure that your developers are accepting security? First and foremost is to understand the security posture, understand their trends of vulnerabilities, understand what vulnerabilities they have been identifying on that has been identified on a very frequent basis. Um, for developers, their trend or their way of writing code also needs to be looked upon. Now, cross-site scripting or SQL injection could be common vulnerabilities, so the code needs to be updated over here. Again, an updated code is something that will lead to a lot of issues, but that is what is to be implemented when you talk about bridging the gap between the security and developers, right? The idea over here is to not slow the developers down. The idea is to strengthen security without slowing innovation. So all they have to do is change their approach towards writing code, but then fixing the old code is something that is going to become tricky. But but then that is important. I mean, not having vulnerabilities is what we want in a web application. So, how important are the items in an application security solution? This is again a chart provided by SNCC, and here we can see secure code training is something that help developers into have a stronger application security. Prioritizing what to fix first, low or no false positives or negatives is something that needs to be also looked upon when your eventual tooling matures. If in case your security tool works fine, you don't need to keep on switching your security tool, because if you've implemented one tool, being patient with the tool is important. Once the tool is fine tuned, you want to stick to that particular tool only. So are we tooling right? Now, this is a very tricky spot when we talk about DevSecOps. Eventually, DevSecOps and DevOps is all a lot about automated tools, right? DevOps bought in automation, and DevSecOps is security tools in that automation to ensure your pipeline runs in a secure. The outcome of your pipeline is secure, right? So, are you tooling it right? When you introduce a new tool, right, it is not going to help. It's not going to be very pleasant for everyone when the tool executes for the first time. Your tool could introduce a lot of errors. Your tool could not have your desired output right. There could be a lot of false positives because this is an automated tool eventually, and it is going to have a lot of false positives present. So being patient with your tool is important. Every tool takes some time to mature. It's not going to like run like a charm in its first run directly. So when you implement a new tool, train your developers to understand how these tools work, and they'll then get well versed with those tools. Try avoiding license limitations. I am someone who would stick to open source tools because I could have multiple threads of those tools running. But if in case there is a license tool that you've onboarded, then keep a track of the license, because if the license expires, your pipelines would start failing, right? So having the right tool is important, and implementing the right tool within that complete DevOps scenario is the goal over here. Why do I keep saying right tool every time? Because if you talk about SAST, like if you talk about SCA, now again, if I am using Python, or let's say if I'm using Node.js in my source code, and if I'm using a simple dependency checker tool, it's not going to identify the right vulnerabilities present within my within my code packages. Um, NPM audit is the right tool to have, right? So hence tooling it right is important. Understanding the current security posture, understanding the current stack of your server, of the code present in your server, and then having the right tool chosen for it is important. So to be or not to be in the pipeline. Now, we would want to introduce a lot of things in the pipeline, but is your pipeline is the optimization of your pipeline right? Is it done correctly? You could implement SAST, you could implement SCI, you could implement DAST into your pipeline altogether. You could also implement multiple other things like infrastructure as a code, or infrastructure scans. We could say the network scans, and a lot more can be introduced in the pipeline. And what would happen if all of those ran together? That is going to end up slowing down your pipeline. It's going to take a long time for a pipeline to get done with. But you want to optimize a pipeline to not take more than 15 minutes to run. Hence, having those security practices in the pipeline is quite the crucial goal over here. We need to choose and we need to understand what the task of the pipeline is, and having those tools in the pipeline is important. Now, when to perform SCA and when to perform SAST is what you want to think about. Now, if you've just gone ahead and made some code level changes, you've not updated your class libraries, you don't want to run an SCA in the pipeline that time, right? But then do you want to completely avoid SCA? No, right? I mean, you want to have SCA also present because your 0 day could be anytime. So if I had to recommend someone on when to run SCA, I would say run it every midnight or run it like 30 minutes later than midnight. Because if there is a new 0 day that has been identified, you get to know about that 0 day vulnerability. You get to know about the CVEs or the known vulnerabilities with respect to your class libraries, if it is present in your code, and have it run accordingly. But if you've just done some infrastructure changes, or if you've just done some Docker level changes, then you don't need to perform SCA in the pipeline. Similarly, if you've just done some cascading style sheet changes, right? You don't want to have a compliance scan run in the pipeline. So to be or not to be in the pipeline for that security practice is also very crucial. Understand you could have multiple pipelines running and performing that specific task for you. So you understand your current need and work with the pipeline accordingly. All right, conclusion. That brings us to an end of the short talk. Having shift left is the right way to do. But if you're performing shift left, perform secure coding from the very start. Fixing early is cheaper, faster, safer. It's going to save your reputation as well. It's going to keep your business running. Automate security testing within your CI/CD. Threat modeling will help you understand your active security posture of the organization. Perform trainings to developers eventually, and security by default is the way to go. Right. So that brings us to an end of my today's course, today's talk, and right, I'll just wait for Vandana ma'am to come back.
Yeah. Hi, Karan. Karan, we do have a lot of things in the chat box. I think if you can respond in the chat, it'll be amazing because there are
Sure,
actually so many questions and even
I'll go through.
experience people have shared. So I'm sure if you
I'll
can
go through
answer
the chat.
them there, it'll be for everyone.
Sure,
Great. Thank you so much, Karan. It was wonderful session, and we would love to have you again soon.
sure. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you for this opportunity. It
Thank
was
you.
it was an honor. Thank you.
Thank
Bye
you.
bye.
And now let's get Somain as well on the stage. Hi, Somain.
Hi, Somen.
Yeah, hello, Karan, hello, Vandana. I hope I'm audible. Actually, I've not tested my mic, so I'm just
Yes,
relying
sure.
on.
It's
Okay,
perfect.
guys, great. So great session, Karan. You really put the stage on fire. I think what you are talking, I think they are simply, I would say that kind of covers the entire AppSec. You're the 360 degrees. I think you are the Surya Kumar Yadav of AppSec
I
community.
wouldn't say that.
You put it in the right way. And yeah, so I think my talk today is like seamless security and how we can actually focus on certain compliance aspects. So another very interesting area of AppSec and how DevSecOps can contribute to it. So I kind of jump to it, and I'm pretty sure people will find it quite interesting.
For sure.
Just give me a moment, and I should be good to go.
All the way
Yeah,
best. I'm sure it's going to be good.
Yeah.
yeah.
Thank
Thanks a
you.
lot. Just a moment. Let me share my screen here. Yeah. Okay. Okay. Hi. I hope my the slide deck is now visible.
Absolutely. Yes, we can see.
Okay.
You
Great.
can actually click
So,
on this hide button just right next to stop
oh yeah.
sharing.
Oh yeah. Okay. Great.
The
So yeah. So
stage is
due
all
to
yours, Somain.
yeah. Thanks, Vandana. So
Thank
yes,
you.
DevSecOn India, thanks for giving this opportunity. Snick all always have been always facilitating and supporting the open source community and AppSec at large. Pretty, I think, really fantastic job, Vandana, you are doing, especially Gerald, Viran, Matt, everybody in the Snick engagement community. I think it's really a very great forum. So I'm Somin. I'm a product security officer at Barco. I've been in this industry this year. This is my 23rd year in this industry. I've been actively working as a developer. I started way back in 2002. And yeah, 2025, it's a long time, but still a lot of work that needs to be done. And in so yeah, so I have a lot of software development experience in Java, .NET, and now focusing on Node.js and other modern day technology. And over the last 7-8 years, I'm purely focusing on AppSec. Um, so that's about me. Now today's topic is seamless security, and let's see how we can address some compliance issues with DevSecOps. So one thing which I kind of liked, what Karan mentioned is like, yeah, security developers think your security is not my job, or they don't really like focusing on security. They try to cut corners, and that is true with all organizations. And what even they don't like even more than security, I think that would be compliance. Now, so let's try to understand this topic, and let's try to see how the chapter unfolds. So the agenda today is, let's say, why compliance. Very important question, right? And I think that's the first question. Why? What the developers even ask, why compliance? um, Then some upcoming cybersecurity compliance for digital products. Again, very important from the business point of view. See, if you can't sell anything in the market, then there's no point developing it and investing the money. At the end of the day, it's the cash that comes in keeps the organization going. So it's very important from that point of view. What are the common themes of compliance regulations? So we have so many compliance standards, so many compliance regulations popping up all across the globe, but they do have some commonality. There is a common theme across them. So I think if we are able to understand the kind of crux of the compliance, I think it becomes very easy for us to out devise strategies, lay out plans for AppSec teams to address the compliance requirements. What is the role of DevSecOps? Very important. Now, in my opinion, DevSecOps has a very important and has a critical role to play here. So let's try to have a look there. Uh, SBOM to the rescue. Karan did mention about SBOM, and I will be talking a little bit more about that in my session today. So yeah, so SBOM is definitely something. It's kind of turning out to be the silver bullet, but let's see how it goes. Some tools, platforms, and how Snick is helping even the community also. So we'll try to look at some of the things, and of course there is a short demo that I've outlined on how the SBOM itself, how we can generate an SBOM, and how we can assess or manage the SBOM and reap the benefits out of SBOM. So that's the agenda. So the first part is why compliance. That's, I think, everybody would like to know. So I think compliance basically helps us in many ways. It basically provides us a framework or a set of guidelines for risk management. I say I would like to do the risk management, but what is my baseline? What is my benchmark? Uh, what is the industry doing? What are my competitors doing? What are my peers doing? I think the compliance outlines those guidelines, those benchmarks for risk management. So I think that is very important there. Data protection, again, yes, outlines the data protection aspects. The data need to be protected. They need to classify it, and I think this is a common uh, requirement across all the standards. Legal obligations, yeah, it's we are legally obliged and required to address to certain compliance even before we can say this product can be sold. So I think that is very important part. Reputation management, see, being able to address to certain compliance standards, being able to comply with certain rules and regulations, I think it's a matter of great pride. And some compliance are really tough, where not many organizations are capable to achieve and sustain those compliance standards over a long period of time. So I think that definitely adds to the reputation of the organization. And uh, in many business deals that I see, is there are a lot of compliance regulations which are like the gates. It is uh, unless or until you have a certain standard, certain certification available for your organization or for your product, you can't even actually participate in a tendering process. So that becomes a very critical gating criteria for the business. Operational efficiency, because the standards and compliances, they kind of have, you are actually forced to create SOPs, you are forced to create policies, guidelines, so you kind of become efficient operationally. And of course, there is a continuous improvement, because for compliance, it is not that it's a one-time activity, it is a continuous activity. So it is, I would say, an enabler and facilitator for a continuous improvement and standardization. I think that again is a key part, because everybody is doing the same stuff, are doing the same, implementing the same controls. So I think that is again another key factor. Some upcoming compliance regulations, I think a lot of work is going to happen, and it's already has started off, kicked off in many parts of the world. So let's quickly have a look. NIS2 directive. So yeah, this is again this is a EU centric directive. You know. It's more related to the network infrastructure, the corporate infrastructure, and there is already a NIS directive in place in EU, but now it's moving a level up, so it's NIS2 directive. Then Digital Operational Resilience Act, DORA. Again, this is a regulation which is very focused on financial institutions across EU. Again, related to covers various aspects of digital operations, and specifically cybersecurity is a very key part of it. And when I say cybersecurity, uh, so yeah, AppSec is an important part of it, because all the digital operations are running on top of software. So cybersecurity is like, the 40% is AppSec, rest all is information security, network security, and other aspects. But 40-45% is easily related, all AppSec work. EU AI Act, again, with the AI coming into force, EU has passed the AI Act, which covers various aspects of AI security, starting from the use cases where AI is applicable, the security and the privacy aspects, the data, the training data, the security of the LLMs, and overall security of the cyber security aspect of the entire solution. I think all is covered. US federal regulations, very important. So we have seen a host of US federal regulations, especially the Biden executive order, which actually put SBOM in focus. It all kind of started after the Log4j incident. But yeah, a lot of regulations, and each of them are very heavily focusing on supply chain security, and not only from the product perspective, but even on the hardware side, there is a strong need to have SBOMs even for the firmwares, for various tool sets that are being provided with various hardware. So I think it is everywhere. You just cannot escape out of it. PCI DSS, again, very important for people who are focusing on the payment card industry, the payment gateways, and interestingly, even SEBI is also now going to focus on SBOM part. The government of India has already released an SBOM guidelines last year, which it is actively encouraging the PSUs and the public sectors to evaluate the software being provided by vendors. We are already seeing that in government tenders. So it is coming everywhere, and of course the NIST, regulation. So it is everywhere. It everywhere. There are a lot of compliance regulation coming up, and you can't really say that no, we don't need compliance or our industry is not regulated. Compliance is going to touch you in some way or the other. Doesn't matter which domain you are working on, you can't really escape it. Now, common themes of compliance regulations, I think very important: data protection and privacy. All the compliances are primarily focusing heavily on data protection and privacy aspect. They are encouraging risk-based approach. There is heavy emphasis on incident response and reporting. Now, very well, I think one of the key aspects of good organizations, secure organizations, is the level of transparency that they bring in case an incident happens. I think the key to successful organizations, in my opinion, is the transparency. The moment you see an organization trying to cover up, trying to hide things, you know that they are not on the right path. So I think incident response and reporting aspects, they are part of the standard primarily for this purpose, because given an option, yes, we will see businesses cutting corners in terms of reporting, in terms of uh, putting resources and efforts towards incident response. Supply chain security, yeah, as I said, very important from the on the software side now, with a lot of almost 80% of the software being composed of open source components or third party components. So I think supply chain security is very important. Critical information protection, yes, of even for nations, even for businesses. Critical infrastructure is very important. It is key for the digital operations to continue. So I think that is very important aspect of the compliance regulations, and continuous monitoring and improvement. So we know security is a cat and mouse game. We have to stay at least one or two step ahead of the hackers. So, and the only way to do it is to be able to continuously monitor what is happening, and to always improve on our level of security or level of protection that we have in the system. So these are some of the common themes here. Now, what is the role of DevSecOps here? How can DevSecOps address here the compliance requirements? What are the key things? So let us quickly have a sneak peek here. So yes, kind of Karan also talked about a lot of things, but yes, continuous security integration, I think a very important part of role of DevSecOps, and kind of also maps with a lot of compliance requirements. So vulnerability management, being able to detect the vulnerabilities and initiate necessary actions, trigger necessary workflows around it. I think this is very important. Automated security testing, again, very primary requirement of many compliance standards, SAST and DAST. Automation, because we want to do it many times, multiple times, as many times. And as Karan mentioned, yeah, again, I agree with him that one tool may not be enough, so we may have to engage with multiple tools here. So automation is definitely quite efficient. Supply chain security, generating SBOMs of components, SBOM of the solutions, SBOM of a complete software distribution. So yeah, again, DevSecOps can play a very important role. Compliance and governance. So in terms of license management, in terms of using components as per their license terms, I think this is something which kind of gets overlooked quite often today. I still see people coming and say, "Oh, sir, this is fine." And when you look at the license, we see it's an LGPL, and we say, "Sorry, boss, you can't really use it in this solution." So yeah, license management definitely a very important part, and scalability and efficiency. Again, as I said, things are becoming more intense. We would like to focus more on high value activity, so all the routine tasks, all the routine security activities can basically be automated, so they move into a repeat review and improve cycle. So if you sum up everything, so what we saw in the previous session from Karan, the entire shift left approach, the entire stages of cycle. So your compliance goes hand in hand with that. It's not that it's one step where you do the compliance. You compliance actually hits you at each and every step. Right. Now, we talked about SBOM briefly, but let's try to see what essentially is SBOM. So, in a way, SBOM is a file format. It's a file. It's it's a kind of a standard that allows you to mention the dependencies, the open source the components, its versions, the licenses, the suppliers, the libraries, everything together in a single place, in a single format. It can be an JSON, it can be an XML, it can be even CSV, but yeah, I mean it's a way to represent everything together. So typical SBOM would include licensing information about vendor information, component details, versions, and then or moving forward with the more latest versions. Yeah, we can also include vulnerabilities and mitigations that are defined for these vulnerabilities. Oh yeah, it is all machine readable. I think that's the key here. So it kind of started as SPDX. It's an open standard for SBOM by the Linux Foundation. It started way back in 2010. So, we now think this is quite obvious, but going back 15 years and people thinking about something like this, I think we should really appreciate the vision of the pioneers at that time, that they could foresee that we would at some point of time in future hit a point where we would need something like an SBOM, right? uh, yeah, so it became an official standard only in 2021. So that's been a long journey. SWID is again another format. It is developed by ISO, um, but it has more use cases than just the vulnerability representation. And the Cyclone DX is again it's a format which is released by OWASP. It is a full stack bill of materials format, which means that I can represent anything and everything that is there in my system in Cyclone DX. And as I mentioned, it's a full stack, so it is actually supporting multiple use cases. So we will briefly see some of the use cases as well. Now, what is the business relevance of SBOM? So yeah, it enhances the software transparency. Yeah, we have to be transparent. I think that is the key. It facilitates vulnerability management because it is machine readable. So yeah, it helps in vulnerability management. It helps me to identify, search for a particular component across my entire deployment. So there are various things that I can do. It helps in software compliance again. Now, again, yeah, if we are selling stuff to US Fed, I think we have the Biden Order 14028, which mandates SBOM in specific cases when we are selling stuff to Fed. Cyber Resilience Act, it is for manufacturing digital products and selling them to EU. FDA, FDA for medical devices manufacturers. It is mandatory for the pre-market submission. So SBOM is there. And even for PCI DSS, for any software that is part of the ecosystem, I think this is SBOM is now very important there. Um, and of course, it also accelerates the incident response. For example, Log4j. I think biggest challenge that the industry faced when Log4j hit was to find out where it is actually used. What are the various systems which are impacted? What are the various softwares which are impacted? I know cases where people were doing DIR find or at the root of all the drives to find out the log4j because they had no other way to know which software is actually impacted and how to patch it. That was again, of course, the secondary thought, but to be able to identify it, I think that was the major challenge there. And it aids in decision making. We'll have a look there. So this is important from the customer point of view, because if I'm a customer, I would say, okay, I would ask my vendors, okay, give me your SBOM. I like to do a vulnerability analysis on your SBOM, and then I can make a well-informed decision. Similarly, for the vendor, um, at the level of PM, at the level of PO, even they can also understand by the by a snapshot of SBOM that, okay, great, my release has nil critical, nil high, maybe some mediums and some lows. I can still manage with that, but it is a decision making tool actually in that sense. Now, SBOM use cases. So as I mentioned, it is full stack and it supports multiple use cases. So we have SBOM, which is the software bill of material, which basically focuses on inventory of software components. Then the SaaSBOM, the software as a service bill of materials, basically which focuses on inventory of services, endpoints, data flows, and more focus on the cloud native applications. Then we have the VEX format, which is the vulnerability exploitability exchange, which talks about the vulnerabilities, its overall severity, its impact, the mitigations that the customer can take. So that is also, it is there. HBOM, which is the hardware bill of materials, as I mentioned, that for the hardware, what is the components, what type of what chip is there, what part number the chip has, all the things can be addressed by a HBOM. MLBOM, machine learning bill of materials, the model, the data set, security, privacy aspects, and various use case considerations. I think they can all again be outlined in a machine learning bill of material. And VDR, vulnerability disclosure report. Now, very important. We now see customers requesting VDR in electronic form, so they won't like to scan uh, the NIST stuff or the NVD stuff. I think the SBOM format provides a very comprehensive and a way and an easy, actionable way to report vulnerabilities. I think so. Yeah, so that is, I think, very lot of use cases. We're going to have a demo on the SBOM soon. Now, important to outline. So SBOM, as I mentioned, there are a lot of formats, but let me quickly walk through the Cyclone DX format. I know we are a little over time, but okay, let's continue. So the Cyclone DX format, it has 17 root elements, which covers metadata, services, components, annotations, definitions, properties, vulnerabilities, compositions, dependencies, everything. If you look at the Cyclone DX 1.6 JSON reference, so yeah, so this is at a high level all the attributes here. So we have the BOM format, the specification version, serial number, metadata, component services, compositions, vulnerabilities, everything is there. So even signature is there. So we can also have assigned as BOM, which is uh, I think it has its own benefits when we are talking about parsing an SBOM in through a system, through an electronic system. So yeah, the signature helps us to maintain the integrity as well as uh, it makes the SBOM quite authentic in nature. So this is the specification. We will not go into the more details here, but yeah, later on I think you all can make use of this link. So some of the tools and platforms that can help us to generate the SBOM. So we have the Cyclone DX Gen tool. This is provided by Cyclone DX itself. Then the Swift tool, which provides the SBOM in SPDX and Cyclone DX format. Then the Microsoft SBOM tool is also there. So uh, if you guys are using GitHub, then at the repo level, it does provide an option to download the SBOM of the repo. Now, it has some limitations in terms of its practicality of use in the production system, but okay, there is definitely some valid use cases around using the SBOM generated from the repo. So it basically gives it on an SPDX format, but there are a lot of tools available where you can convert an SPDX format to Cyclone DX. Now, very interestingly, SNCC is also has been, I think it has been one of the key promoters and supporter of SBOM and Cyclone DX in the open source community, and there is a provision in SNCC CLI to generate the SBOM either in SPDX or Cyclone DX format. So if you guys are using SNCC CLI, so yeah, you don't really need to use anything else. You can actually use the SNCC CLI itself to generate the SBOM. So time for a demo. So what we are going to look here today are a few things. So I hope my screen is still visible.
Yes, Somain. Can we zoom it a bit if you go in the demo screen?
Yeah, just a moment. Okay, so I think you can see the Docker desktop.
Yeah, I can see the Docker desktop.
Yeah, can you see it?
Yes, I can see it. Yeah, I
Okay.
can see it.
Okay, great. So these are some of the images that I have. Like I have RabbitMQ, Nginx, Alpine. So first of all, I'll quickly like to generate the SBOM. So let me pick RabbitMQ here. I have various ways to do it, but I'll just quickly generate the file here. So the option to use is Docker SBOM RabbitMQ latest. Format is JSON, and I just name it to give a name, and it would take some time. And then in the meanwhile, so this is the first step where you are actually generating the SBOM, right? Now generating is okay. So the generation is done. So let's see. Okay, great. I have the SBOM outlined here, and as you can see there, this is the SBOM. We have it says the format is Cyclone DX, specs version is 1.4, and you see all the packages there, the types, the license it has, um, the identifiers. Yeah, so the libraries, the publisher, the name, CPE, package URL, very important. um, and of course, then based on this, now this is all great, that okay, you see, there is this information is there. Now how, what to do with this, how to process this, because this is again tons of information. You don't expect we as a human to process all this. So now you need a tool that helps you to analyze an SBOM. And I think the best tool in the industry today is dependency track. They don't need to go any further, but dependency track provided by OWASP is the best tool to manage your SBOMs end to end. There are a lot of commercial tools also available, but as Karan said, I'm a great fan of open source. You can have endless use cases around it, and this is, I think, one of the very very good tools from OS. Although OS has always been a provider of a lot of great tools, but this, I would say, this is definitely, I would say, goes in the top of the list. Now, let's quickly create a quick project here and say, okay, rabbit MQ, and I say, I don't know what the version is, but I say this is the latest version. I say, okay, it's a application, and I do a create. By the way, it has all the APIs. You can automate everything in the pipeline. I am right now showing it on the UI, but trust me, the APIs are much stronger. Go to the project, you go to components, and you upload the SBOM. So now this is the place where you go and pick the SBOM and you upload it. It will digest it. It will take some time to analyze it, and then it would eventually give you a kind of a representation as I show here. So this is, I think, the Node 8 container, one of the most vulnerable packages, or the pieces of software which is available if for analysis. So you can see here, it has, of course, a whole set of vulnerabilities. So if you go and audit, you sort them, you have even critical vulnerabilities, and you can actually triage them, do whatever you want to do with them. Of course, we are not using Node 8 anymore, but as it was a good example, by the volume, you see it has 33 critical, 69 highs, 42 mediums. So quite a number. Now coming back here, RabbitMQ, okay, no vulnerability is great. I was, but it does outlines the components here. Maybe it may need some more time, but yeah, but that the idea is that it will actually pick up all the vulnerabilities. I also have node latest. Maybe I can just do it for node latest. So I can actually also have that parent-child relationship in dependency track. It is still doing it. Okay, it will take some time. Now, this is the time when you think why things are not going faster, but trust me, it is really crunching the numbers like anything. Here you go. Okay. So yeah, so I think that would be all from my side. I would be happy to take questions here.
Thank you so much, Somain. I think there is a discussion here, but no questions at the moment.
Okay, great.
Yeah, but it was amazing session, and I love the topic S bombs and different kind of S bombs you mentioned and the compliance side. I think this is totally amazing, and there's a lot of research needed in this area. So this is a very well discussion that we had today.
Great, great. Thank you. I hope people found this interesting, and I really thank you again for this opportunity.
Thank you
Thanks a
so
lot,
much for
Vandana.
joining.
Yeah,
Yeah, thank
thanks
you,
a lot.
Somain, for
Take care. Happy Holi, everyone. By the way.
happy Holi, and thank you for joining us and always being there as Sneak Ambassador.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Thanks. Take care.
Yeah, thank you everyone for joining us today, and happy Holi to whoever is listening and will listen to the podcast. Thank you.